gonna sue. Drink water. Don't drink and drive.
Game over!
Take it light. Okay.
Now you're more fluent.
Bacchanal, he's got three!
Up, Bears.
So this is really good right here. Absolutely. Let's do it.
Everybody, this is Ori from Hoop Social presenting the Creator Hour. We are here on the Sports Fluent Network, and we have an excellent show ahead of us. Little preview, we have Fact or Fiction with Noa Dalzell, who's also going to talk to us about her journey and how she became what she is. We're talking WNBA. We're talking Boston Celtics. This is going to be a great show. Welcome to the Creator Hour. Let's go.
Get your popcorn ready. It's a show you can't miss. Welcome to the Creator Hour, where legends reminisce.
Yes, welcome to the Creator Hour, where legends reminisce. We are here and we have an excellent show today. I am super excited because we get to talk the WNBA, we get to talk the Boston Celtics, and you know those are two of my favorite subject matters of all time. And just to mention, I get the perfect guest to talk these things, so I can't wait to get to that. But first and foremost, we have to talk a little bit about some current events. The most current event, if you have been paying attention, is Joel Embiid just got a contract extension, 3 years, $193 million. What do we think about that, guys? That is very interesting to me. Joel Embiid is a guy that is super polarizing. He's a guy that tends to either bring out the stands or bring out the critics because of what he's accomplished so far. I know that he's an MVP. I know he's a supreme talent. But as we analyze how the process has gone, I remind you, we have to say there have been some significant flaws in the way that Philadelphia has built this thing. And Joel Embiid, despite his enormous talent, has had tremendous issues in the playoffs. And as a Celtics fan, I'm well aware of some of these, but as just a connoisseur of the NBA, it's difficult to not look at those failures in the playoffs and go, geez, what is this accomplishing? What is the process really getting us? We've gotten to one Eastern Conference Finals. We can't seem to make it out of the second round. We are a team that has now just added Paul George and kind of changed the dynamic, the Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid dynamic. I'm not quite sure how Paul George even fits in. Pushing Tyrese Maxey to a third option, I don't know if that's a great idea. But Philadelphia is all in on the Joel Embiid trade, and I totally understand it. You have to capture this window as soon as you possibly can because we know this window is closing. We know this window is closing very fast because Philadelphia has struggled to make the right moves for a long time. So has the process been a failure? Probably. I have to say that I can't see that it's been a success. By now, you would imagine Joel Embiid, with all his talents, would probably have a few more accolades under his belt, i.e. championship rings as well, finals MVP. I mean, we're getting to the point where we have these certain expectations for these guys. People are putting him in conversations with the top 10 centers of all time. And ability-wise, I totally understand that conversation. But accolades-wise, guys, we're getting to a point where this guy has not gotten far enough in the playoffs, all things considered. If you're the best player in the world, you got to bring it that time of year. And Joel Embiid has had some failures. So it's overall a tough thing to critique, but I think the process has been a failure. The process has been a failure. You've heard it here. We are going to let everyone know so they can record this little snippet. The process has been a failure. All right, now to get to the good stuff, the fun stuff, the stuff that you guys enjoy here at the Creator Hour, we are going to talk to a creator. I'm super excited. You guys know how much I love the WNBA. You guys obviously know how much I love the Celtics. So getting this creator on was something that was super exciting for me. Noa Dalzell She is a writer for SB Nation, lead writer for the WNBA. She's a reporter for the Celtics. She's a content creator for the Celtics. Just a brilliant sports mind, a great writer. I'm super excited to have her on here. Let's welcome Noa Dalzell to the table. Noah, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. Always fun to talk about my two favorite things as well, which is the WNBA and the Celtics.
Uh, Absolutely. When I was looking through and trying to come up with guests, I was like, you know what? It might be a long shot, but she is exactly the guest that would fit this time of year. So thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, absolutely. Always happy to join.
Now, the thing we do here in at the Creator Hour is the first question we always ask: becoming a content creator, becoming a reporter, becoming a journalist. How did that journey start? What was the motivation to start that journey for you?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So I studied political science in college, and I was actually a lobbyist for alternative proteins, which is like plant-based meats, out of school. Worked in the climate space, did that for a number of years, and then kind of realized like I always loved basketball. I always loved writing, and I did a lot of journalism in high school. Actually, I like led our school sports section. I wrote about basketball all the time. I wrote about the Celtics. Had a website that I ran as a kid, but I didn't think I didn't know that it was like secure enough to actually pursue as a career, which it's still probably not. Um, but yeah, so I started blogging about a year and a half ago, and um, just writing for a Celtics blog, which was I kind of got lucky that right around when I decided I really wanted to do it, there was an opening, and I applied and got the job and started writing and started going to games, and it kind of just all blew up from there. And so it's been a very fun year and a half, and was very lucky that my first year covering professional basketball, the team that I followed my whole life, won the championship. So I hope I didn't peak this past year, but it was a lot of good things kind of lining up at once, and a very good timing for me as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, before the basketball portion, what was it that got you so interested in journalism?
Yeah, so I love telling stories um, in real life about myself, about other people. Like I've always loved that. And then I also love basketball. Like I grew up playing basketball. My dad played professional basketball overseas, and so that to me was like just a. I always kind of joke. I feel like it was almost like my family's religion because we weren't a religious family. I feel like basketball was kind of as close as it got. Um, and then yeah, I just felt like there are certain things that I liked about the way basketball is covered. Like I think you can find good analysis and good columns and things, but there's also things that I didn't like. And I was like, I feel like I have things that I want to write about and I want to talk about and say that I don't see right now represented. And that's kind of what made me want to go actually try to do it. And so yeah, I guess it's like kind of love of talking to people and storytelling, and then about a sport that I really cherish.
Yeah, that's awesome. I actually took journalism in college as well. That was something that I was really big into before they started saying the pen was about to die, and that journalism wasn't really a thing to get into anymore because of how things were changing communications wise. What are some of the difficulties that you think you've run into in this content creator world with your journalism mind?
Yeah, it's tough. Um, I think for one, it's tough because we're all walking a line of like saying your opinion, but then also just saying what happened. And I write for SB Nation. That's my full time writing job now. And sometimes I'm writing a column, and sometimes I'm basically just saying what happened in a game and trying to be as unbiased as possible. And I think the lines have really blurred in the media space between being really objective and not. And also, like a lot of times, this is something that is a little too specific, but a lot of times in post game, like we'll do what all the reporters will be asking Joe Mazzulla about why Tatum didn't shoot well or like something specific. And that's the questions are piling up on that. And then afterwards, we'll do like a post game show and everybody's like, wow, all they talked about post game was Tatum not shooting well. And it's like, that's not what they talked about. It's what we asked about. Right. And I think sometimes what's weird is like the media sets the agenda for what the conversation is. That's something that I've noticed a lot is like people will tweet out clips, and I tweet out clips all the time or quotes but you don't actually know that like the reason they were talking on that topic is because reporters were asking about it, right? So I think there's a lot of different things that I've learned being in this space where like you're trying to be as fair as possible. You're also trying to like ask the questions that fans want to know, trying to cover the things that fans want to read about. But you also want to leave your own bias at the door regarding like which style of basketball you like or who your favorite players are or whatnot. And obviously, like it gets easier over time. But for me, it was kind of like one day I was a fan and the next day I was like in the reporting room. So it was kind of like a quick adjustment.
Yeah, that's got to be a roller coaster ride. Yeah, going from fan to objective, analyzer. That's one of those things that I find it interesting because nowadays I don't know if the term's taken on or if I've just coined it, but I call people fanalists. A lot of fanalists exist now. And being someone like you that's trying to do this professionally, what do you think, the how do you read the room with all these fanalists trying to do the same thing, but maybe they don't have the credentials or the way to get in like you do?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, first of all, I'm of the belief that like if you have interesting things to say and write, like there shouldn't be any gatekeeping.
Mm,
And part of it is because like I was one of those people where like I didn't go to journalism school. I studied political science, and I kind of feel like I almost jumped a few steps in a way. So
mm.
a lot of times, like I feel like now I'm like learning backwards almost in a sense as far as how to be as good as possible in this job. But in my eyes, it's like if you have something interesting to say, like you should say it. And if people, if it is actually interesting and refreshing, then like you'll see that because people will want to read it and engage with it. Um, and so I know there is like some aversion to the fact that people could just go online and just say whatever they want. But at the end of the day, what I've realized is like there's not that much of a difference between regular people and reporters. And so like they're entitled to say what they want the same way that a reporter is. Like I used to view like who does ESPN pick for MVP, and I used to be like that's the pick, that's the gospel. And now I'm like that's just like somebody that I work with that like has their own opinion the same way that I have my opinion in the same way that you have your opinion. And so it's just kind of demystified the whole thing for me. But obviously, you want to be able to make sure that you're always being accurate, and that's the risk of this whole space becoming so centered around social media is that now anybody can just say anything, and it's like you didn't have an editor check it, you don't have any sort of like journalistic process, and so there's a lot of risk to it too. But I think that there's a lot of it comes down to also just being more media literate, and like people need to know when they're consuming something that's been edited and reported and when they're just like reading someone's hot take. Because we'll tweet things out too that like a reporter could just tweet something out and then maybe that wouldn't be in an article that was published, but it's their take on Twitter. And so it's all very blurry and it's all very confusing. But I'm with the belief that people should people have the right and ability to write and talk about sports if they so choose.
And I appreciate that. That absolutely is a fair sentiment because there are a lot of gatekeepers that tend to exist that kind of like push people back and be like, you can't enter this space unless you have the appropriate credentials. So for somebody like you, that a poli sci major that decided, hey, I want to step into this universe because I'm passionate about this universe. What does it take to make that step? If you were giving advice to maybe a fellow content creator.
Yeah. You're saying like to make a step to actually becoming a reporter?
Yeah, to make the step to actually follow your passion through. Yes.
Yeah. So first of all, I don't know if every content creator wants to become a reporter because I do think that like you lose like it's different, right? Like you
Mm,
can't just like you have like this is for me like honestly last year I my full-time job I was still lobbying, and so I was able to just go to games and like sit back and enjoy it, and now I have deadlines and it changes the cadence of things. So first of all, I would say just like when you start doing something as a job, it's always going to be a little bit different. Not to say that it's not worth it, but just it becomes a job, right? And that
mm.
if you hear Jokic talk about that too, right? So there is some truth to it. But I think the first recommendation I would have is to turn like an aspiration into just trying to do everything you possibly can. Like I realized last August I wanted to do this, and by January I was freelancing for like I'm not exaggerating 11 publications. Like it was like I just was like anything that comes my way I'm going to say yes. I'm going to message people on Twitter, I'm going to message people on LinkedIn, I'm going to email. Like I just was like I want to do this, and so let me make it happen. And I'm already starting a little bit later than I would have had I known from the beginning. And so that'd be my advice, is to just like not just to sit at home and kind of hope that it happens, but to say like this is a field that's really competitive, obviously. So you have to just put everything into it. It can't feel like a job. And if it feels like, oh, I already put my 40 hours in, you're not going to make it, because I could just say like I'm having the time of my life. This is a dream. But you're not working 40 hours. You're literally working like pretty much whenever you're awake. It feels like so. You just it's part of the game, and so you have to really make sure you want to do that. And if so, you have to act on it. I would say.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it's one of those things where you really have to, I would say, have the drive to match the passion in order to kind of make them both come to fruition. Correct.
Yeah, I would say so.
All right, all right. I'm down with that. Now, speaking of drive, there's a player in the WNBA that seems to have more than enough drive for all of us, and that is Asia Wilson. Now, I know that is somebody you're obviously very familiar with. Uh, can we talk about Asia Wilson a little bit? What about this year has been so spectacular for you as a fan and as a journalist?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say I think part of why Asia Wilson has not been as hyped up in the past. There's a lot of elements to it. I know that we can talk about race and gender and all those other things, but I think a lot of it just comes down to like post players and just post players not getting as much credit or as much hype. And this goes for the NBA too, but even more so for the WNBA because a lot of people are watching the WNBA wanting it to be the NBA, and then they can't dunk, and then they're like,
Mm,
okay, this is less good. Whereas the WNBA guards, it's like there's not as much of a drop off in theory if you're viewing it through the lens of like I'm an NBA watcher, like oh
mm,
they shoot threes, the NBA players shoot three. So just wanted to put that out there. But Asia Wilson, what we have seen from her this past season is I would say one of the greatest seasons in basketball history by an individual player. The player efficiency rating, which is a pretty convoluted metric, but it has her as having the most efficient season of any player, male or female, since the metric was created in the 80s. So this, of the 80s. So to me, like this is somebody that there's not enough words, there's not enough hype that we could possibly give to what she's accomplished this year. And maybe the only stain on the season that the Aces have had is the fact that as a team, they haven't been great.
mm.
And obviously, like, in the best possible case, she wins a championship this year. And right now, they're not the favorites. But she's just somebody that, like, she doesn't really have any holes in her game. She is a great offensive player. She's a great defensive player. Like I want to say she's better on offense, but then she's also the best defender in the league probably.
Yeah.
So it's like, she doesn't turn the ball over. She has really high usage. She just set the record for most rebounds in a single season. And if you just watch her, like I don't know that I've ever seen anybody as beloved by their teammates. And I'm not going to name any other players, male or female, but I've seen a lot of records be broken over the last 10 years in basketball. And I've never seen teammates react to an individual accolade the way that her teammates react to hers. And that's what made me want to go interview her and meet the rest of the team and talk to everybody. It was because I was watching the scene on TV and I was like, this is wild. Like they are literally like, they are so genuinely 1000% happy for her in a way that's unique even from normal teams that like each other.
Right. I mean, what is that a testament to? Is that a testament to the way she approaches the game, or is that just a testament to like her leadership skills outside of the game, in your opinion?
I think a lot of it is about outside of the game. Like I asked her about the things that she was the most proud of and just everything that she has gotten to accomplish in her career. And she said, I love my teammates. I love what they do on the court, but what I care about even more is what they do off the court and the people that they are. And, you know, I haven't been covering basketball for that long, but I just covered a championship team. Once in a while you hear stuff like that. It's not a common sentiment. Like I love my teammate, but it's really, it's all about the off the court stuff. It's like really, you can see there's this, camaraderie in that locker room that's very unique. And she's at the head of the snake. And I think she's gotten the rookies to buy in, every single player that you talk to. Tiffany Hayes was a retired WNBA player, came out of retirement, joined the Aces, and is basically told me it was like the best decision ever. She couldn't be happier. And, it's just been an incredible ride. So that's the experience of everybody there. And I think that it's not just her, it takes more than one person to build a culture, but I
Sure.
think she has a lot to do with it.
Absolutely. Well, it takes more than one person to build a culture, but look at what Tim Duncan did. One person can make a gigantic difference. And Asia Wilson to me
For
is
sure.
that type of player where she is transcendental, in my opinion, when it comes to, I mean, I hate to break it down like this, but man, that mid-range game is just so impressive. Like I feel like I'm looking at like Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan or like when she's in the mid range, She can do whatever she wants. Like this this is just an incredible athlete, male or female. And
Yeah.
why what do we have to do as, as a culture, as a fandom, as whatever, to make sure that Asia Wilson becomes a household name?
First of all, I think she's getting there. I've
Hmm.
seen, like, I hate to say this, but I see page views on articles, right? And I think her name right now is up there with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese as far as like people are searching her name, people are wanting to read about her, they're clicking. It's not quite where they are, but it's certainly nowhere near where it was a year ago. And there are a lot of other great players that I think are still completely overlooked. Like I think Nafisa
Hmm.
Collier is having a phenomenal year for Minnesota, and
Ah,
people don't really know who she is. Like she's
hmm.
not really getting a credit or attention nationwide for what she's doing. And yeah, so it's interesting. I think that there's always going to be room to grow, but as more people watch the WNBA, they're going to find players that they gravitate towards. And you're not going to have to tell people, hey, you should be a fan of this player or you should watch this player. um, I think people are going to find like, hey, I came in for Caitlin Clark, but now I love Kelsey Mitchell or Aaliyah Boston or whatever it is. And you're already seeing that. A lot of Iowa fans that came in for Caitlin Clark have fallen in love with different Fever players now. And so, yeah, I think Asia Wilson she doesn't have to be everybody's favorite player, but I think that people that watch a lot of WNBA basketball have gravitated towards her because it's not just what she does on the court and the dominance, but she's super likable. She's super
Hmm.
charismatic. Like some people have it, some people don't, but she's somebody
Absolutely.
that when you put a mic in her hand and you put her in front of a camera, like 9 out of 10 people would walk away being like, I really liked her. And I think that is just an opportunity. Just you have to just have that exposure and have the chance to see her.
Well, that's it. Because I look at her and I see like supreme marketability.
Yeah.
I see like somebody that could be, everybody's favorite player. One of those types, just because of the way that she's such an ambassador for the league as well. I really appreciate everything she does, and I guess just personally, I want her name to be in all these conversations that Caitlin Clark's and Angel Reese's name are in, because it's like she's been doing this for a while now.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think increasingly people know about her, but it's hard with the Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, like the fan bases that they brought in and the divisiveness that came with and everything else. But it's really it's unreal to see just how much attention. Like I'm scared to talk about either of them online because if you say anything that the other person's fan base doesn't agree with, it's like it's now you've unleashed something that I haven't seen covering basketball before.
Yeah,
And so
pure
yeah, it's
chaos.
yeah, it's a tough bar to say like that she needs to have their popularity because I think it's a very unique circumstance, but I think just like the fact that she's getting her flowers and it's also just not just exclusive to women's basketball. I think a lot of times when there's like all-time greats, like it's hard to accept and fathom that we're watching it in real time. It's way
Mhm.
easier after the fact to say this person was the greatest ever, but and that's been a lot of the attention around her this year has been like her teammates saying, "Hey, this is happening in real time. Like she's an all-time great. Like let's appreciate this. Let's cherish this. Let's not let this moment pass and reflect in 15 years that we were all alive during this era and we didn't really take it. We didn't take it to heart what we were watching."
Right, that's such a great point, because I feel like, yeah, no matter what sport we're in, we tend to always look at the hindsight, and we can't really appreciate what we're witnessing until it's potentially too late. So I definitely agree with that sentiment. Now, not to get into Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese too much, but the impact that those two had on the WNBA, from like a viewership perspective, and just that kind of way. Do are is it all positives? Are there any negatives to what Caitlin and Angel are doing, or is it all a positive momentum for the WNBA?
I think everything that they're doing is positive. I think that some of the attention that's come with them has been negative. And, I was actually on a Connecticut Sun podcast earlier today. We were talking about this. So I feel like I've been thinking about this stuff all day. But, with all the increased eyes and attention, just as more people, right? And that also comes with a lot more hate and a lot more online vitriol and harassment and racism and bigotry. And honestly, I don't follow other professional sports. Like I'm really just particular in basketball, but I hear that other sports have it even worse, like the NFL and I see this stuff on NBA Twitter and on NBA socials and all that, and it's pretty rough. But I know
Right.
it's not limited to just basketball. But I think this year was kind of like an awakening for a lot of these players of what it's like to be in the public, like the public spotlight as a professional athlete when there's actually like a lot of fans and a lot of people tuning in, not just like your local season ticket holders, but people from all over the world, people that maybe don't have your intention, your best interest in mind, maybe aren't here to support you, but they're here because they hate you because they like somebody else. And it's been a learning curve, I think, for the athletes themselves. I think it's been a learning curve for the media covering the sport. And honestly, for me, like this really bothered me covering the NBA, how trendy it is to dunk on people and how fun it is to hate on athletes. And like it always bothered me as a fan when like Celtics fans started like berating players because they missed a couple shots. Like I just don't understand why sports and fandom has to be so include so much hatred. And I think right
Toxicity.
now with
Yeah.
WNBA, yeah, I think a lot of times people are like, wait a second, like this thing is about to explode, slash, like it's exploding. Like maybe it doesn't have to be this way. Maybe we can reimagine like a better way to grow a sport. And then there's people that are like, this is the way that it is, and it's not going to ever change. So there's been a lot of discourse around it, and I think both of them, Caitlin and Angel, without wanting to or meaning to, have brought such diehard fans with them that it's led to some negative ramifications to their teammates potentially. Like some of the Sky teammates were talking about this, not even specifically Angel Reese, but like they've been dealing with so much stuff this year. And then obviously, like Caitlin Clark fans have, a portion. I don't want to say all fans, but a portion of those fans have gone too hard too. So it's all kind of been a lot, honestly. And I think that's the downside of what has otherwise been really incredible growth.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment also because I mean, as somebody that's been a fan of the WNBA for quite a long time, I mean, my favorite player was Cheryl Swoops. I like the Houston Comets. I'm an old head. I'm dating myself now, but like I I've been so thrilled with the new eyes. But at the same time, yeah, like you said, sometimes with those new eyes comes like this new wave of hatred that just vitriol and stuff that you just don't know quite how to deal with. Like the WNBA is growing. We all know this. The WNBA is getting bigger. We just got to take like the hits with the growth and just kind of keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think you have to take the hits, but I also think that there's opportunities to say like this is the line that we can't cross. Like, we can't have players receiving, being on the receiving end of racism and transphobia and bigotry and death threats and harassment. Like I literally received death threats for writing an article that basically the premise of the article was that we can't be critiquing people that foul Caitlin Clark as like they're trying to hurt her. Like there was a lot of discourse around Diamond Shields and Kennedy Carter, and I was basically like, there's a racist element to the way that those players are being covered, as like hurting Caitlin Clark, like this player that just can't be touched. Where I don't think she is that. I think she's fiery and competitive and can handle everything that's been thrown her way. But
Mhm.
people were so mad about the concept that I was like, and in any way anti Caitlin Clark, which I really wasn't if they read the article, but I think people just didn't like the fact that I critiqued somebody that critiqued the criticism of fouling her, basically, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
I experienced that. I was like, whoa, hold on. If I'm getting all these messages and I'm getting like death threats and on Instagram and people are, it's just crazy. I've never once received this before as a reporter. I was like, I can't even imagine what the players are receiving. Like, this is what
Mhm.
I'm experiencing for writing one singular article. And I'm not a famous basketball player and I'm not on TV. And so it kind of opened my eyes. I was like, this is too much. This can't be like something that we accept. This can't just be like, okay, the league is growing, therefore this is what's going to happen. Like I think we have an obligation to push back on it, and it's going to open some uncomfortable dialogue around like the way we cover athletes in general. And I think that it's a conversation that's needed to happen. I talked to my dad about this yesterday. He played professional basketball for 15, 16 years, and it was not in the age of social media. And I was like, can you imagine like getting like nasty messages when you finish a bad game and like people blaming you for your parlays? And he was like, I literally can't even imagine what that would have been like. And so
Oh,
it's not like this has been the way the sports has been forever. This is a relatively new phenomenon of this online kind of back and forth with players, and I think that people should be more accountable towards talking to athletes the way that they would talk to people in regular life.
100%, 100%. Because, we kind of get a lot of those keyboard warriors and the folks that, tend to think that it's okay to talk negative about somebody, quote unquote, to their face or to their account. And yeah, we end up with when you lose all accountability, you end up with a lot of nonsense, in my opinion. And I think that's where we've gotten with some of that stuff, where some of the dialogue and some of the narratives around Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, has become more jock entertainment conversation than it should be, when we should be just able to appreciate both of these players as players and what they're doing, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
and I'm sure you're probably in that same boat where it's like these narratives tend to really push some strange agendas, and it's just, I don't know, it's weird. I mean, like I said, being a WNBA fan as long as I have, I feel like they've gone through so many of these trials and tribulations, and trying to get people to understand that, like, the simplest premise, in my opinion, that the WNBA is high quality basketball, and people just have a hard time. Just, I don't know if it's misogyny, I don't know what it is, but I mean, in your opinion, what is taking it so long for the WNBA to make such a large statement?
It's a good question. And honestly, one of the things that I'm gonna do in the off season is really like to study the history of this league. And specifically because early on it was really booming, like the first few years of the league, during the Houston comments and all that. So there are things that went awry, and I think I really want to dive deeper into it because I think there's some speculation to have, but also some factual things that I think will be
Mhm.
unearthed when I talk to people and all that. So more on that to come. But I do feel like for a long time it was trendy to dunk on the WNBA and on women's sports, and to just say like if you posted about the WNBA, like all the comments would just be like, "Who cares? Who is this?" Like that's not really a thing anymore. Even like the
Mm,
players that are not Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese or their teammates, like if one of these big NBA accounts or sports accounts posts about any player, really, people have like actual takes on them, for better or worse. But it's like real basketball takes, not why do I see a woman playing basketball? So part of it I think was a societal shift, but I think it's so contagious. So that as soon as it started to, as soon as people started liking Caitlin Clark, then other people started liking Caitlin Clark. And I also think like there is this idea that everybody likes Caitlin, everybody likes Angel, but part of why they became the story is because the media made them the story. Like I was just talking about this earlier with the idea of like we determine what's being discussed in the post game pressers, and then we can go talk about it as though that's what was being discussed. Like
mhm.
Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and the rivalry and the national, NCAA games and all that, like that became the story. And everybody ran with it because people realized that like there was a rivalry and there was enough there to make a compelling narrative. And then now it's spiraled completely out of control where I don't think the players even view themselves as rivals, but the media sold it and talked about it all the time. And the big expression is like if you talk about it, people will come. If you put it on TV, people will watch. But if you don't do those things, if there isn't real coverage of it on Sports Center, if there isn't accessible games to watch on ESPN during prime time, like then you're kind of making the barrier to entry really hard. And I think for a long time it was, and now people are seeing that when you make it really accessible, when you make it really easy to watch, and it's all over the place, it's all over the news. Stephen A. Smith, for better or worse, is talking about these games, and it's kind of the mainstream. I would say right now, Caitlin Clark's like the most discussed name in basketball, right? So in a lot of ways, like this is unprecedented from my lifetime. But I don't think it's going away anytime soon because people are recognizing that the basketball that's being played and that's been played on the WNBA is elite level basketball. And I don't know why it became a joke, honestly. I wish I had a better answer. I don't know if it was like a couple people that turned it into a joke. There were big media people that are responsible for kind of turning it that way, or if it became trendy among teenagers. Like, I don't know exactly where
Mm.
things went wrong, but it's getting back on track. And I think that's the best part of what's happened this past year.
Yes, I'd agree 100% because, yeah, there always used to be like kind of a feeling about the WNBA that was kind of cringeworthy, where people would just seem to be like, I don't appreciate the sport as much because yada yada. And yeah, now that there's more accessibility and the games are everywhere, I feel like there's been kind of a paradigm shift where people are like, well, holy crap, this is great basketball. Like this is what I want to watch. I want to watch basketball.
Yeah.
Why would I not watch these games? Because this is basketball at its highest level. Like, sure, there's no dunking. I could care less that there's no dunking. Dunking is not a fundamental part of basketball. dunking is an aesthetically pleasing thing that people do. It is not a part of the game, like fundamentally. So like if there's not enough dunking, like that doesn't affect my watchability. And so I feel like that's kind of a cop out for some people. Like, oh, they can't dunk. Like, whoop de doo. Like these are tremendous athletes at the peak of their game that are so fundamentally sound that it's the games you watch, like the Minnesota Lynx, their defense. I mean, just incredible. Like it's just how do we get more people on board? How do we get more people on board? Besides, the Caitlin Clark pieces and the transcendent athletes, I understand are going to bring a lot of eyes. But as reporters and journalists, like, how do we keep people aware of how good the WNBA is?
Yeah, honestly, so I've been thinking about this. I'm going to be in Connecticut on Sunday covering the Fever Sun game.
Oh, nice.
And like my job, right, is to write articles that people want to read and to go on podcasts and talk about the sport in a way that people want to consume. And I already know that Caitlin Clark is the click driver there, right? Like people, if I write an article about Caitlin Clark, then people will click on it. That's what I've learned this year from seeing the back end analytics to the sites that I write for. But I think we all have a responsibility, media members that are covering that game, and I'm just giving a very specific example, but to make sure that we're telling the full story of what happened in that game and not just what Caitlin Clark did or what she did on the bench or what her stat line was, but actually like everything that happened. And so to me, like any team that she plays against, there's now a bigger spotlight on that team. And there's a bigger spotlight on every single one of those players. And Dejanay Carrington, I think a lot more people know who she is now than maybe did a year ago. And a lot of it is because the league has grown and because she was guarding Caitlin Clark in the first game, like that helped. And now they're realizing like she's so exciting and she's so fun to watch. And she probably should have been her own draw. And she's fiery. The things she says are interesting and she's smart and she's one of the best guard defenders that I've ever watched in real time. And so she on her own is a story. And I think she's somebody now that if I write about her, people click. Like she wasn't maybe a while ago, but she is now. And so as time goes on, this audience that initially came in to watch Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, they're going to fall in love with other players. And we're already seeing it happen. And that's why I'm glad the Fever in the playoffs, because I think that it engages people that maybe weren't going to watch. Not everybody. There's some real fans that would have watched the WNBA playoffs regardless, but there's going to be a lot of people watching that Fever Sun game. And they're going to realize, like, Alyssa Thomas is the all-time triple-double leader in WNBA history. DeWanna Bonner is one of the greatest scorers in the league history. And there's so much greatness on this court on both ends. And Caitlin Clark is part of it, but there's other great players to watch too. And I think that people are going to realize that because at the end of the day, the reason people like Caitlin Clark for the most part is because they love basketball and she's a great player. And therefore, I think it's going to extend to other players. And so to me, it's like the more games she can be in, the better because people watch those games and then it's an opportunity for them to love those players too. So that's why it's like, I'm a fan of hers. I'm a fan of Angel Reese. I think she's had a similar effect, not exactly the same, but similar energy of like people are now tuning in and they want to see who else is in the court. And the Minnesota Lynx, I think they just haven't rode that wave yet. I don't know what it is. I think they haven't been controversial. They've just been good basketball players. They're not in the major media market, but I don't know what it is. I'm like, this is a great team. They're my prediction for who's going to win the championship. I think it's going to be Minnesota.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
No,
so
no,
I don't know what it is. Yeah, I don't know what it is that they haven't really ridden this wave yet of like fame, but maybe this playoff run, maybe that's what will do it.
I think this is where they could because I've been the same way. I've been a Minnesota Lynx fan for this whole season because I think that their defense is tremendous, and they say defense wins championships. So I think that could put them in give them a very strong case to win it all. Speaking of that, we have a little moment. I wanted to talk about the WNBA playoffs. This looks like an exciting batch. Like I am stoked. Like we could see the Las Vegas Aces and the New York Liberty in a semifinals game as a 1-4 matchup. Like you said that you picked Minnesota. How hard was it to pick against New York and Vegas?
It was hard, and it was also really hard to pick against the Connecticut Sun because that's my hometown team, and that's the team that I started covering, and so I want to root for them too. But I think, honestly, like just looking at since the Olympic break, Minnesota's been the best team in the league. They've beaten the Fever twice. They just beat the Sun on a game winner from Bridget Carleton. And if you look at that roster, like they have it all. They really do. They have so many underrated players that every time I watch Courtney Williams, I'm like, why is she not a household name? Because she's awesome. Look, there's so many different players there. And obviously Nafisa's having one of the greatest seasons that I've seen. And so, yeah, I think I love their defense, but I also think they have more offensively than Connecticut does. And I think you have to have a good defense to win a championship is my belief. And that eliminates a couple teams off the bat. So I don't know. There's a lot of ways they could have gone. I don't feel strongly about it. I wouldn't put $1 on it if I did sports bet, which I don't. But I don't feel strongly about the pick. But I have to pick one, and I think Minnesota just feels like they're going to surprise people. And all of a sudden, people that have been kind of like casually tuning into games are going to be like, wait a second, like, who's this team? Why did they win the championship? So I can see that happening. But I think any of the top 4 teams, I have a strong case. And that's what makes this playoff run so fun. I feel like a lot of times in basketball, it's like you kind of know who's going to win, and the whole playoff run is kind of making it look like it could be a lot of different directions. But in reality, we all know it's going to be the 2017 Warriors or whatever it is. So this year, you don't have a team like that. I think there's some good candidates for sure.
Got a lot of parity. The WNBA has a lot of parity. That's 100% sure. They top to bottom, that league is super talented. Last little bit, I guess, about the WNBA. Diana Taurasi, is this going to be her last series as a player in the WNBA, or will the Phoenix Mercury surprise people?
They're not surprising people.
Yeah.
I'm so low on that team. No, like not from like a hating standpoint, but I just think they've been so inconsistent. They've been one of the worst teams in the league since the break. And there's so many games where it's like, wait a second, like why are they already down by 15? Why are they already down by 20? Like it's too early for this. So I think that roster needs a shakeup. I think that team needs a shakeup. A lot of good individual players. So I don't know exactly why they didn't work out. I haven't covered that team on the ground, but I think that would be the most surprising upset of any upset to me in the first round. That being said, I would not be shocked if she's not retiring this year. It's a crazy take. It's not informed. I don't have any sources to tell me that. I think that there's a trend in the WNBA to like retire and maybe come back. And I think she has a lot left in the tank, honestly. And I think that's where she's having such a hard time is like some nights she's still really good, So it's just, it's hard to walk away when you don't have to. And right now she doesn't have to walk away. Like she could stay another year. As crazy as that sounds at her age of being 42 years old and in a league of younger players. So we'll see. But I think that most likely like these are her last 2 games. I don't think it's going back to Phoenix. So.
Yeah, and it's hard to say that because Taurasi has been such a spectacular, but one of the GOATs. I mean, let's just be frank. I mean, I don't know however you rank her amongst the GOATs, but she's, depending on how you look at it, I have her in my top 5, and if I analyze it deeper, I'm sure she's probably closer to 1 or 2. So this is just a tremendous player that's about to make her exit. I mean, is there anything that you could say that Diana Taurasi meant to you in this game, or anything that you have to say about Diana Taurasi at all, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think just you have to appreciate the longevity, like the fact that she stayed with one franchise, played for 20 years, won 3 championships. Like to me, it's like I love that like old school feeling of like you just played your whole career in one place and you're like a legend, forever a legend in that city. And obviously she's meant so much to the game. Just one of the, I don't know that it's gonna take a long time before anybody breaks her scoring record and accomplishes what she accomplished on the court. But to me, it's just like being able to have that kind of career, 20 years in one franchise, like that's insane. I saw somewhere yesterday it's like 70% of the franchise's games she was a part of. It's like you are the Phoenix Mercury at that point. And we don't have a lot of examples like that in history, but the ones that we do, I've always gravitated towards those players like the Tim Duncans, hopefully Steph Curry. Like I think it'd be awesome if he could retire there, but it's so unusual to be able to walk away from the same team that drafted you on your own terms. That would love to see that happen for her, especially like she's still playing at a high level. She's still averaging 15 a night, so it'd be pretty special. But yeah, it's hard to articulate like what she's meant to the sport and what she's meant to women's basketball.
Well, it's crazy because, like, so many people bring up LeBron James and his, and I'm not trying to say knock LeBron James in any sense, but they bring him up immediately as like the longevity, playing at 40. It's so crazy. But it's like you forget about Diana Taurasi. Like, she's also playing at a super high level at this age. It's you gotta keep the context. You gotta keep that context because there are other people that are doing certain things that are super impressive.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, also just thinking about the fact that LeBron is how many years? 3, 4 years younger than her. Like that's still a big difference. Like
Exactly.
and the fact that she can still play more, it's like I think she could play another couple years, probably
Yeah.
physically speaking.
She's
So
got that
it's
Tom Brady thing.
unparalleled. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
love to know more about like what she does behind the scenes and how
Oh,
she stays this ready to go.
100%. 100%. Her competitive spirit is like no other. I mean, I compare it to the Mamba mentality. They call her that, the white Mamba. Like she clearly has that it factor that is necessary to be a great basketball player. So nothing but love for Diana Taurasi. I do have to move on. I got so excited talking about the WNBA, I forgot that the regular NBA is coming up. The annual Ben Simmons shoots 3-pointers tape was recently released, so we know that the NBA is right around the corner. You're a Celtics guru, Celtics content creator, Celtics reporter, someone that's in the know. I have to know about these Celtics, and what I want to know about these Celtics is some very important things. First thing I want to know about these Celtics: do you like the fact that they spent all this money, brought everybody back? Do you think this team is in place to be, a repeat champion?
Yeah, absolutely. I always say like I've been making the podcast circuit on the Celtics repeating or not. Like I've had answered this question a bunch of times, and
Mm,
I think the best that I can say is that they were the best team in the league by a lot last year, and they brought everybody back, and they're going to have a target on their back, but also the confidence of knowing that this formula works. If there was any doubt, they know that it works now. So they have all the pieces. That being said, I think you need a lot of luck to be successful in this industry, and that's the part that maybe fans don't really understand or they take for granted. But Joe Mazzulla talked about it constantly when there was like a week of media availability between the conference finals and the finals, and during that week, Mazzulla basically said multiple times like that should have been a 7-game series. That could have been a 7-game series. We swept them, but it came down to like 3 plays, and he's reiterated that time after time that series in particular, the conference finals versus Indiana, could have easily gone the other direction. And so, as much as they were dominant last year and they broke all these records and they blew teams out and they won by 50 and all these other things, like they easily could have also not won the championship. And so, to me, it's like not just injury luck because that's always important, but also like individual games, like things have to shake your way, especially in the playoffs. And so, I have them as my pick to repeat, but I don't think that they're more likely to repeat than to not, if that makes sense. Like I think that
sure.
there's 30 teams and they each have a good chance. There's probably 5 or 6 that I think are in the running to actually winning a championship. And the Celtics lead that pack, but I still think it's more likely than not that they're not going to do it because it's so hard to do it twice in a row.
Yeah,
And nobody's done it since the Warriors in 2017, right? So there's a
absolutely.
reason for that.
Right, right, and that's definitely the case. I mean, they reloaded. I feel like the Celtics did everything right in order to try to repeat. So the formula, like you said, was a working formula. They added some pieces that I really like. I really like Lonnie Walker coming to town. I really like what they're doing. I like the coach. Joe Mazzulla has done nothing but impress me. I wasn't sure what he was going to be like. Are you in that same sentiment? Has Joe Mazzulla impressed you since he's kind of evolved and taken over from the get go?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, for me, the biggest thing about Joe Mazzulla and the Celtics is that you don't really know what's happening in the locker room. Like I go to every Celtics practice and every shoot around, and even so, I don't really know what he's like as a coach. Like I have to admit that. I think the fans and media and everybody likes to speculate, but we don't. I just interviewed Dana Altman, Oregon coach, Coach Peyton Pritchard, and I just asked him that question. I was like, "How much does the outside world actually know?" And he's like, "You guys have no idea what's happening in our locker room, basically, and when we're having a good coaching game, when we're not." But I think that Joe is somebody that everybody's bought into, and that's what I can tell because we ask the players that, and it's very clear when players are just like, yeah, and when they're like, I would do anything for this guy, and that's what we saw about Joe Mazzulla this past season, and so yeah, I'm high on him. I think that he's a very interesting person. He doesn't like he's almost honestly almost operating at like a different playing field than the rest of us in a sense, where like you can
Mhm.
ask him a straightforward question and he's like, why are you asking that question? Where are you going with that? I'm going to push you somewhere else. I'm going to redirect that. I'm going to not answer this question to signal something for you to learn for next time. Like, there's a lot of mind games with him. And for a first-year reporter, it was like, whoa, this is wild. And now I'm covering the WNBA, and the coaches are like very straightforward. You ask a question, you get an answer. There's not a lot of like games around it. So he's interesting as a person, but he clearly found a system that works and that makes sense. And he has complete buy-in from a cast of stars. And that's really all you can ask for in a coach.
100%. I mean, you could tell that the guys love him. I mean, I don't know if it's because he watches the town so often or if there's something out. No, just kidding. But with these Celtics and with what they've done, and with Joe Mazzulla being such a strong piece, do you think that this regular season is going to be an easy one for them, or do you think they're going to be one of those? This could be one of those like, let's not give as much effort during the regular season because we know how good we are in the postseason type of seasons.
They're not going to take it easy, I don't think. I think that they're going to rest guys for sure, especially considering the fact they played through June, and especially considering the fact three of them played in the Olympic team, and regardless of how much minutes they played, like they had to be ready all the time and work out and everything. So they're going to get rest days, and that's going to probably annoy fans who want to see Jason Tatum play in Charlotte or whatever it is, but they're going to get rest days. But I think that you're not going to see them like coast. I don't think you're going to see a championship hangover the way that maybe you saw for other teams, because I think that this team has the mindset of like, we're starting back from square one. We're not defending the title. We're back at zero. And Joe Mazzulla, like for all of his eccentric qualities and the things about him that make him different, I think is going to really benefit them when it comes to defending a title, which he's already made clear is not a term that he likes to use.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I appreciate about him because he is a guy that you could tell runs a little unique, and I like that energy about him. I like the fact that he brings that energy to the team. These guys, I want to agree and believe you so hard because I want to feel like they're not gonna have any times where they let the foot off the gas just because they want to prove it. They want to prove it. I feel like they want to prove it because some people think last year was a fluke. So I can see that kind of on the bulletin board if they wanted. If they do, in fact, prove it, like, are we witnessing something super special right now that we're not, like we talked about earlier, that maybe we're not quite ready to witness and we're only going to, in hindsight, enjoy?
Well, I can just say I'm enjoying it.
There you go.
But I think you're absolutely right. I think that there's a lot of talk about legacies and where this team will rank and all that. And I had so much fun last year. And a big part of the reason that I had so much fun was because I loved watching this team play basketball. And I loved watching how unselfish they were and how many, different guys could take over in different nights and nobody seemed to really care. Especially the Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown kind of in their prime superstars. So yeah, I think we're watching a really special team. And if they can win this year, like winning back-to-back titles is so rare in the NBA that you do that if you're in a league of your own, right? So that's why I think it would be really cool for them to accomplish that. I still talk to Celtics fans that are mad about 2022 and mad about 2023 that they don't feel rectified from last season. Like they're still not satisfied, even though they won that one title. So 2 titles, I think you're, in a different conversation now. And there's a lot of like around here. I don't know if you're local, if you're in Boston, are you elsewhere?
Oh, yeah, I'm New England. I'm from Maine.
Okay. Because I still feel like people talk about 08 and like that team should have won, that core should have won more than one ring. And
Yes.
I think this core will be similarly remembered if they win just one, that they should have won more than one. And so I hope we can appreciate like just the championship as a standalone, like regardless of what comes next. And then next year, like there's a little bit like of an edge taken off when you're watching games. Like it doesn't need to be like, should we trade Jaylen Brown? It's like now we've ended those narratives. Let's like enjoy the basketball that we get to watch as a city, as a region that Celtics are pretty much in the mix every year now for a very long time. So like it's something to be grateful for if you're a sports fan that this is the team that you happen to be rooting for.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate that. That's a good sentiment, and that's a good way to stop. I have a little bit of fact or fiction for you. Just a quick little snippet. Nothing too ridiculous, but I just want you to answer to the best of your ability, fact or fiction, for the next couple questions that I have coming up. We already answered whether the Celtics will be. Fact or fiction, the Celtics will win 64 games or more again?
Fiction.
Fiction. I think that you're very fair with that one. Now, Jason Tatum is a top 5 player in the NBA. Fact or fiction?
Is he right now?
Yes.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, it is.
I hate player rankings, so it's so hard for me to.
So do I. That was
Um,
just because we're on a show.
I'm gonna say fact. I'd say he's probably number 5.
That's completely okay with me. I've been in the same boat for a long time. Now, does Jaylen Brown, do you think, because he got all those flowers last year, he got his Eastern Conference Championship award, he got the Finals MVP. He didn't make All NBA last year. Do you think he makes All NBA this year? Fact or fiction?
Yeah, fact.
Now, do you think it's because of what he did earlier, or do you think he's going to have another a great season?
I think voters in the media is very last year's playoffs really factor into regular season awards for the following season, which probably isn't fair, but it is the nature of things. So I think if he has the exact same season that he had last year, he makes All NBA. And I think last year, part of why he didn't make it is because people were still faulting him for the 2023 conference finals, whether or not they admit it. Like, he was an All NBA player last year. I was stunned that he was off that list. And so I think that voters will kind of rectify that. And the same way that we're seeing with Asia Wilson, she didn't win MVP last year, and not saying that she definitely deserved it, but she definitely didn't deserve a 4th place vote and all the hysteria around that. So I think people are going to overcompensate now and make sure that everybody votes for her and everything. So I would be very surprised if Jaylen Brown, unless he has a bad year, which I don't think he will, but I think if he has another solid year, he easily gets there.
He's on All NBA team. I think that I agree with you. And then I have 2 for the WNBA. Caitlin Clark. Do you see Caitlin Clark winning an MVP within the next 3 years? Fact or fiction? She will
winning an MVP. I think she's gonna. Fact. She'll get at least. She'll get some in her career. So I'm looking at. Yeah, I think that seems about right.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's so hard to tell with her because her development, even within this season, has been astronomical. She first started a little slow, took her a little bit to get into it, and then once she got into it, you're like, oh wow, this lady just entered herself into the MVP conversation this year. So yeah. And then the last little tidbit: if we do in fact get a Vegas Aces versus New York Liberty semifinals, and you were in fact a betting person, what way do you lean? This is not a fact or fiction. This is just strictly, I need to know. Aces, Liberty.
Ooh.
Where would you go in that series?
I think the Aces have their number a little. Even though that's not how this year went, I think the Aces would feel pretty good going into that matchup. So yeah, that's my pick.
The Aces. So do you think they can repeat this year? I know we only have a little bit of time, but I know a lot of pundits don't say so. So
they have a 2022 Warriors energy a little bit of is their time over? Actually, it's not, and they have the best player in the world. That kind of thing. So
I appreciate that. That's a good sentiment. I like that analogy 100%. Now we are really at the end of this now, so I want you to promote yourself a little bit. This is where I let everybody kind of tell people what are the best methods to reach you. So for our fans and audience that want to connect with you, what are the best methods for them to do so?
Yeah, best way to find me is on Twitter. It's just Noa Dalzell. And then I have a Celtics podcast, which I'm also going to be doing some WNBA coverage on. That's called You Got Boston. So that you can search You Got Boston on YouTube, or just my Twitter is Noa Dalzell. And then, you'll find all my other stuff from there.
Awesome. Well, Noa, I appreciate you being on the show. This has been fantastic. This has been a tremendous learning experience. I've had a lot of fun here. So thank you so much. And I hope you have an excellent rest of your night. And to everybody that was watching, this is Ori B from Hoop Social on the Creator Hour. This was an excellent experience. I hope you guys enjoyed yourself. And once again, this is the Creator Hour where legends reminisce. Have an excellent night, everyone. This is Hoop Social out.